Hey guys, welcome to the Heart of David. Hope you guys are doing well on this day. I was watching another Christian YouTuber, and channel name was Bible with Becca. And I like finding channels where there are people who are pure, people who are contrite of heart. And I was just listening to her testimony, and yeah, I recognize I have a wrinkled shirt today. Whatever, I let it sit in the dryer for too long, whatever. And she said this, that not enough born again, let's just say born again, just believers in Christ, open up about trauma and God. And I know I have, but I have not gone in any I have another channel, and I've erased so many videos or hidden videos from it, and I told my entire life story. I've written a book about my life. I'm not selling my book on here, I don't do that. But if you ever want to see it, I'll point you towards it. And the things that I know now, new diagnosis and different things like that, has changed that book. I think my voice is going to go. I have throat dysphonia, so it may go. Trauma in your walk with God. If you've never seen my videos before, I have many intractable pain disorder, so it makes it pretty tough for me to speak. I have difficulty speaking, and I also suffer with a lot of pain. It's not trauma that causes me to be this way, so I just kind of want to open up about that. Yeah, I feel like my voice is going to go. Yeah, I've definitely talked, and I've revealed my life and stuff, but I've never went in any depth about how I felt, experiences that I went through, and what they did to me, and how I overcame them. So my message here is about overcoming, but overcoming through Jesus Christ. For me, it left in not only trauma, but multiple intractable pain disorders, the worst pains on earth. And mix that with trauma, and the pain that I have causes trauma. Man, I just remember there were times when, like, I didn't know what these were. I didn't have a diagnosis, and that wasn't my fault. I had gone to all the appointments that I should have, but they were hidden. 13 and 18 years I went without two significant diagnoses, and that caused me trauma. But I had trauma induced long before, back in right when I became a teen. And I'm going to talk about that. Just give me a sec though. Not having a good day with my throat. Sometimes when I make these videos, like before I make them, I have to spend literally 2 minutes just trying to clear my throat just to make it just right. I have autism, and that is important to what I'm speaking about. I don't think I knew I was different than other people, but for other people looking in, and those who were around me, I know they knew I was different, and I knew I was different, but I had girlfriends, I had friends, and how would you ever tell a person has autism with that? I grew up in a family with 3 older brothers. It was a strict family, but my parents were good to us, and when I was, I'll just get right into it. I was in, you know, a lot of schools have grade 7 and 8 that are not in a high school, but where I went to school, where I went to school, 7 and 8 were with the high school. They were separated, the 7 and 8, but we were in the same school. And it was grade 8. I was more on the younger side, you know, because I was born in November. I was like, you know, it was like right at the end of the year, pretty much. So there were some people who were older than me, but you know, some almost by a year. And because I couldn't concentrate in class, because of, I don't know what you would term it today, like maybe ADD, maybe even ADHD, the real type, you know, associated with autism. And I just remember I wasn't doing good in math. I wasn't doing, not that I could not do well in every single subject, but I was distracted by everything. And it was in a time where the school that I went to, it was the worst group of students that has been there in 30 years. Like, man, if you saw the people, I just can't even begin to say. And I got into trouble because I couldn't concentrate in class. And I was doing things that I shouldn't have. I was committing crimes. I was. You know, I was a good person. I was always kind to people. Always. But I went just with the wrong things, and because I couldn't concentrate in class, I started doing things outside the class that I shouldn't have been. You know, just the things I regret now, obviously, but those things have been forgiven. I just remember I want to be very careful about what I say because I don't want to implicate people. And that's not my point here. There's actually, for all the time I've ever been on this channel and my other channel, there's something I wanted to say about this, but I can't. I'll just give you the incident that started it. Other than those problems I had with this distractibility and stuff like that, you know, like, I think I was doing, well, obviously I wasn't doing well, but I'm talking about mentally. Even though I had those issues, those things could have been worked out, but I was going down a bad road. I hated school at that point. I'll just leave it to this. I was hit in the face repeatedly. I don't know, repeatedly, I'd say three, 4 times. And the person who was doing it was a lot bigger than me. You know, they're just a lot bigger. That's just what I'll leave it like. And what happened shouldn't have never happened. It didn't matter any circumstances. It should have never happened. And that's the incident that changed me. I just remember it may have been the very next day. In the classroom, I was class clown, okay, in grade 8. Why? Because I couldn't concentrate in class, and there was, man, you would have to see me, okay? The people who were in the classes with me would remember. You know, I would yell at teachers, not yell like I would say the funniest things because, you know, I was compensating. Pardon me. I was compensating. I became class clown. But when that happened to me, everything changed. I remember coming to school one day and feeling shame. I just didn't feel the same. I started to feel anxiety, and I became kind of hyper vigilant. But it wasn't, it became worse as it went along. I just remember, I don't mean feeling shame all the time, but like I didn't feel the same around people anymore. I didn't feel the same in the classroom. And eventually with time, what happened on that day, being struck in the head and the body, punched in the face, backhanded, whatever. I just didn't feel the same. I specifically remember this. Thank you. It was grade 9, okay? So it was the next year. And I wasn't doing well in school, grade 7 and 8. They passed me through because they didn't want me to be left behind. And, it's like I just did the bare minimum. And actually, they did the same with my friend who passed away when I was around 19 years old, 18. Good friend. And so there I was in grade 9, and I just remember thinking in my mind, oh no, now I'm in a time where you're earning credits and stuff like that. And I just remember thinking people are going to get ahead of me, and then they did too. This was part of the reason I started to do really bad in school, was because I developed hypervigilance, anxiety, and paranoia, okay? Not by drugs, even though I would later go on to do things like LSD, that's what people were doing at the time in groups that were, looking at things like marijuana and stuff like that. And I remember this. So I had not taken any drugs at this point, okay? No marijuana, no LSD, none of them. I don't think I even had any alcohol yet. I may have had once. But in any case, so it was grade 9, and it was, like, pull up your bootstraps, This was advanced classes. My parents put me in advanced classes. Most people went in just the general classes, okay? And that gave me anxiety because I knew I had to overperform now. And the first class of the day was English, and like we already were going to have to do an essay by the end of the week. Read this book and do an essay. I'm like, overwhelmed. And the teacher would not let me sit in the back of the classroom and put me at the front. And this was the first time I ever felt this. So she put me at the front of the class, and I just noticed something. I'm like, wow, what is this? I'm like, I feel like people they're staring right through my back. So I was paranoid, man. And I knew it was from that event that this happened. Being struck in the face, it was all that led to that, because nothing else had happened to me other than that. And I just became in a state of hypervigilance, and my nervous system always working on overdrive. And that's what it is. It's called your HPA axis, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, where you're living in that state of trauma, and it becomes normalized. So once the trauma happens, it can just keep going on. You're living in that forever hypervigilant state, and that's what was happening to me. I couldn't do my work. I couldn't do anything. Eventually, I did go to the back of the class. I think I spoke to the teacher, but then I can you imagine that you're in class and suddenly you feel people are staring at you? That could be just increased social anxiety too, right? But man, I did not feel comfortable in class. Grade 9 kind of traumatized me, and I got into drugs. I got into LSD. Other people were doing it. They really were. At that time, it was actually quite popular. I take responsibility for the things I did, and I was stupid. I did it right in class. You say you did it right in class with that? Yeah, I did. I don't know. Man, it was just, I made some pretty stupid decisions. And so, I would binge drink on the weekends, and you go on other events, right? Fights and not that I started fights, but there were a lot of people or places where I went that they would come and crash parties and end up in fights and things happen over time. I was when you start using, you end up in places that you're more prone to traumatic stress, because when you're using, you go to places that you regularly would not be. And so I did not feel good at all. I got into marijuana. Man, I don't know why I smoked that stuff through my school. I have no idea why I spent my, I don't know, grade, let's just say the end of grade 9, 10, 11, 12. I was there probably for another 2 years just trying to get my credits, and which I did. But I spent it in a haze, and I just made myself even more paranoid. That's just the cycle of addiction. But when it wears off, you feel better. So why are you using it? I was probably doing it because other people were stupid. And of course, alcohol always made me feel better, and I couldn't, I was the guy who, oh man, you never know what could happen. I could go a spiral into a depression, or it could be really great, and it was all because of these events and stuff like that. I was also traumatized by having a bad LSD trip 3 times in a row, and those really affected my life and the trajectory of my life, and I was dealing with a lot of traumatic stress. Pardon me. I think this is necessary to speak about. I'm just giving you some of there are many other events in my life. Maybe you guys are aware of things I've talked about, but this is my earlier life, and I was just trying to escape. And I was never willing to face myself. Face those raw emotions. Stop drinking alcohol. Get off all these pills and get off. I went through some scary events in my life. Those other scary events I will not talk about because they're so much worse, so much worse than the ones I've already told you. They're not worth speaking about. Just know that I went through things that just are not normal. I think more because of autism and just the way that, I always saw people getting ahead of me, and I never could bring myself, that's what someone who constantly drinks alcohol, binging, even though it was on the weekends, I was hurting my life because I was on these antidepressants and mood stabilizers that when I would binge on the weekend, it would literally take me 4 or 5 days just to recover. It'd be like being in a state of overdose. It was hard going to school like that, and after school too, for a number of years. And everything did change when I was trying to change my life. I took that antidepressant from the 1950s, phenelzine, and I developed the serotonin syndrome, and that's where my physical pain began. Not directly, but indirectly. I tore my neck through convulsions, very violent convulsions, and that's how my pain began when I was 23 years old, 23 or 24. It was in 2004. But I did believe in Jesus Christ all my life, but my life obviously did not reflect any of that. You know, one of the major things in my life is, you know, a major roadblock is autism. I'm not using that as anything, but God, it's also no small thing. I watch my brothers get ahead of me. I watch my friends get ahead of me, and it really, really bothered me. I didn't really feel stable, and the reason I didn't feel stable was because I felt stable when I wasn't, you know, if I went a month without drinking alcohol. But it was the pills, it was the alcohol and the drugs that were making me unstable. And of course, I had trauma, and I had trauma upon trauma, upon trauma upon trauma, and that's what happened in my life. So, how do I deal with this, and what happened? Well, I feel like I was put through a very heavy fire, a very heavy burning. You know, I don't know. You know, I went through a lot of drug withdrawals. Like, I abused benzodiazepines. I was taking bottles at a time of that stuff. Because I was trying to avoid myself. But I didn't get into that addiction on purpose. That didn't happen on purpose. But I certainly made it spiral out of control. And it wasn't until my pain that I realized if I'm to take these painkillers to help my pain, and I keep on this route, I won't do very well. And so my addiction stopped just like that. It's been about 16 years, I believe. Used to be a smoker, and you know, I smoked about a pack a day for almost 20 years. And yeah, I have very, without treatment, overwhelming intractable pain disorders of my spine and of my full body. I have two full body intractable pain disorders. Or sorry, one, and the other is half my body. The pain suicide diseases, and I could say a lot more about my pain, but I'm not going to. But it was my pain that took me out of this, and I went on a very long journey of being immobile. I lost my mobility for pretty close to 10 years. And then my mother died, and it wasn't until coming into here that God forced me. I know it, because it can't be anything else because of where I am today. I've been in this apartment for 7 years. It's been 7 years. Today, September 1st, man. 7 years today. Wow, wow. 7 years today. That makes me think it's kind of no coincidence that I'm making this on the seventh year. It was September 1st that I moved in. And, you know, my body was destroyed, man. I had to rehabilitate my whole body, and the things I went through, oh my. So I moved in here, and I was suddenly thrust into a lot of responsibility where when I was at home, I either spent my time on a couch or a bed. When my mom died, I got back on my feet. I forced myself on my feet. And I remember developing, oh, that was so painful. What's it called, of your legs? When your legs are so swollen, they'll go like double the size that they regularly are. You know, that happens to people who have like congestive heart failure and stuff like that. And you hear about Trump, by the way. I don't know if he's going to die, but in any case. So just let me pace for a sec here, guys, because of my abdomen. There are so many people, like, you understand, like, that just cannot be alone. It's hard to be alone for many people. And it wasn't that I was worried about being alone, that I couldn't take that time alone and handle that time alone. It was that I worried that I wasn't going to be able to do things because of my state. And I didn't even own a cell phone because I had no need for friends. I didn't even speak. I didn't even speak for like 3 years. You know, maybe a few words a day, because I was so tired and my pain was so bad, and it wasn't being controlled properly because I didn't have the diagnosis. And yeah, so when I moved out here, it was like, you know, you got to do your wash, you got to clean the floor, and it's not easy taking care of an apartment, and you know, when you're in that state, and then suddenly, you know, now you're paying those bills. Now I'm getting my pain medications, and it just built and built. I rebuilt my body. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of times that I went out and came back here crying because I have adhesive arachnoiditis of my spine. And but I just kept pushing and pushing, and I went to 2 walks a day, and then I started to get looking into God. You know, I was at a point where, you've probably heard my story anyways, where I wanted to go to assisted death. And it wasn't because of any psychological suffering, although, you know, that was, I didn't like that. But it was because my pain was intolerable. And God wouldn't allow it. And I know there were things that God taught me. I started to look into God, and I started to look at some scriptures, and I started to look at some videos. Unfortunately, first it was Joyce Meyer, that type of thing, Joseph Prince. I didn't really know anything else better. And then, boom, the narc comes in my life. You know, I don't have the best boundaries at that time, and 'cause I spent a lot of time at home. It was learning. It was not as if I didn't know and judge people's character properly. It was more an online thing, although I saw them on a few occasions. You know, a lot of talking though, and I learned who this person really is, and who this person really is. A lot of evil in it, and I just recognized, I don't know, maybe that was like, how long did that last? A year and a half or something? It was after that that I learned my proper boundaries. Not only that, but my boundaries were not the worst. It was things, it's harder to tell a person's characteristics, what they're really like, if they're not in front of you. And that was the problem that I was facing. Learn your boundaries today. Enforce them. Don't let people get into them. But this is really what it was after that. This is where things really started to look up for me. And I know it was God. I started to look into the Bible, and just one day, just out of the blue, I decided to confront my inner self. Introspection. So all you people who love God and are dealing with trauma, if you're not willing to look and accept in what I would call unconditional acceptance of yourself, this is what happened to me. This is what I'm dealing with. I accept that, but that does not define who I am. that acid trip that I had when I was 14 years old, where I was all frozen up, doesn't make me who I am today. Because I'm not on LSD right now. Whatever that did to me that day, that is not me now. So when I started to look into myself, it was the first time that I really said, hey man, these are the things I'm dealing with. I have trauma in my life, man. I gotta heal this stuff. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And it was like, boom, God came into my life. It wasn't long after that I was, I know it was God on my heart. Things started to change in my life, and I started to understand the Bible more, and pretty tough at the beginning. You're looking at other people and you're like, man, they know so much. It's not about that, right? A child can understand. It's about the love of God, and it's about what he can do for you. No, I'm just kidding. That's not about what he can do for you, although he gives us lots of blessings. Yeah. So I just remember, actually give me just a little break here and I'll save this part. With trauma, you'd be, how many of you are just feel absolutely stuck? And it was different for me, unless you suffer with pain, that I could barely walk. Okay, guys. So here I was talking to I used to go to a pain clinic in my city, and I would get ketamine infusions for my pain. And there I met a pain psychologist, and I went and saw her on a number of occasions. She was very good to me. And she was reinforcing, like, you can do this, you can do this. One day I was speaking to her, and I was starting to speak about the things that I'd been through in my life, and that's where it all began. And if you know my story already about what happened with my phone, something happened then. I can't go further on that because that's just too deep. I started to turn into a different person, started to take accountability. Even though these things happen in my life, it does not define who I am. And if I feel things like embarrassed, for certain things, or shame, or have panic attacks, and I only feel shame if I have a panic attack around someone. But I've taught myself, so what? If it happens, whatever, just walk away. That doesn't, that's just in that second. Let that second pass by. Be willing to accept who you are and start moving forward. Don't look back. It doesn't mean you can't look back and try to correct your life, but don't go back to those old ways. And believe me, you can just keep building and building and building. And I don't know, guys, if you know the rest of my story, yes, I am still hyper-vigilant. I don't think those things will ever leave, but they can get a lot better. I keep myself busy. I'm in 2 different schools at the same time, university and personal support working school. Maybe you'd like to go in, because of the things you've suffered in your life. Start studying, go to a school, start developing skills. And these were the things that I didn't do because, it may have gone back to the trauma in my life. I can't give you the full answer right now. I don't know for sure. But because of that trauma that I developed when I was almost 13. It was at the end of 12, right? I remember. No, sorry. I was 13. I was. Because it was grade 8. It's hard to remember these things, but that trauma that I developed then certainly made me get into substances a lot more. I actually didn't get into substances because I wanted to relieve something. It wasn't that way. My first alcohol, I remember was Christmas break. I went to a friend's house and he offered me a mixed drink. And then it was like hashish and marijuana. There was guys at a park. I was sitting there. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know what hashish was yet. They handed me a bottle. I took it in. Boom. I was high. That's how it all began. You know, you get it and then you want to do it again. So, gain skills. Oh, that's where I was. Where I am today. Yes, I still feel hypervigilant because of the traumas I developed then and throughout my life. Those don't, you know, like I don't really think about them. I'm being honest. I don't really think about them all that much. But it doesn't mean that I'm still not in a state of hypervigilance. But I act accordingly. I make sure I do the right things in life. I read the Bible when I get up. You know, I do that less now. I read less because of the schooling that I'm in. But I'm always thinking about God. Because by God's grace, He saved me. Because I'm born again. And that's what brought me through the most. I'm nothing without God. Nothing. It was His Spirit inside of me that pushes me to do anything I want. My pain drives me too. There are many things I can't do because of my pain, but there are not many things I can't do these days with God behind me, with the Spirit of God in me. Keep your hands busy. Exercise. Drink water throughout the day. Eat fruits. Eat fibers. Have a good mixed diet. Sleep at the same time. Man, this is your life. Start learning. Don't be idle. Do not be idle. Yeah, I still get panic attacks and stuff like that, but I still try my hardest because I know Christ is with me.